I'd like to introduce our next panelist, Judge Carnesale. She is a Superior Court judge in Fulton County and graduated from Emory University of Law, where she started off after as the Chief Assistant District Attorney with a Blue Ridge, Judicial Circuit. Some of her many titles that she has held include the Division Director at the Georgia Department of Family and Child Services, the Deputy Director of the Georgia Office of the Child's Advocate, the Director of the Child Death Investigation Program, and the Assistant Attorney General at the Law Department of the State of Georgia. She has also worked to found the Infant Safe Sleep Coalition and is a member of many groups such as the Georgia Child Abuse Treatment Act panel, the Atlanta Bar Association, the Georgia Association of Women Lawyers. She is also working to restart a program called My Journey Matters and has been a huge supporter of student leadership Johns Creek. Personally, seeing Judge Carnesale live in court and her way of handling cases to me shows that there is compassion within our elected officials and helps restore our faith in the judicial system. And with that, it gives me immense joy to welcome Judge Carnesale here today and our moderator for this segment, Aditi Mohan.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. Thank you for inviting me. I'm outside Chattahoochee High School. I'm going to show you where I am. My son's got a baseball game here tonight, so I hope it's not loud. I found the most quiet spot I can find, but I am in fact on the ground outside Chattahoochee High School.
Sounds good. I haven't been to Chattahoochee High School in so long. I go to school there, but I've just been virtual.
Oh, you've been virtual. Well, it looks like everything's in good shape for you when you come back.
Yes.
So let me apologize in advance about cheering. That looks like every sport is playing a game here tonight, but I tried to find a quiet spot, so hopefully it'll be good.
You're good. Thank you so much for joining on still.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So as we've heard today, to understand gender, we really have to look beyond gender norms, and we have to start to examine roles and stereotypes as a set of practices that kind of reflect our power system. So this includes looking at the economic and political spheres of our social life, which we've been doing today. And gender equality represents a huge loss of human potential with costs for men as well as for women, like Olivia was saying earlier. I think it's really integral to democracy to have development and a human rights system to which everyone is entitled. And I'm so happy to have Judge Carnesale speak with us today about these topics. So thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for inviting me. And I understand you got your Gold Star for Girl Scouts today.
Oh, yes.
Outstanding. Congratulations. I'm proud of you.
Thank you so much.
That's great.
All right. So for our first question, it's just about your journey as a whole. You've been assistant district attorney to a judge in a superior court, and your journey has been really expansive. So I would love if you could speak a little bit about your journey and what you've learned along the way.
Well, I think that the main thing I've learned is that you never stop evolving. So I didn't set out to be a judge. In fact, I would say I decided maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I wanted to be a judge. I wanted to be in the world of child protection. I didn't really want to be a teacher because too many kids at once can make you nervous. But I always loved dealing with children. And so I started off knowing that I wanted to go into the world of child protection. That's how I ended up in child abuse prosecution. And that's how I ended up in the world of child welfare. My interests evolved over time, but to be honest, my lenses didn't change that much. So even as a superior court judge, one of the things I'm most interested in is the age of the offender. We have a ton of kids charged as adults in the Fulton County Superior Courts. And you may ask me about it later, but that's why I'm involved in a program called My Journey Matters for very young offenders who are charged with very serious crimes. And it's a way to avoid really ending their lives with very long prison terms and shoot to get some better education instead. But I'm also very interested in whether offenders have children themselves. So I find in court a lot, I may order parenting classes as part of someone's sentence when they didn't really hurt their kids, but it's obvious they've got kids they can't take care of. So even though my interests evolved, my lenses, the way I look at the world and what I'm very interested in never really changed.
That's so interesting. I think it's really nice to see how people's career evolves, especially as we're thinking about our future careers and we might have certain things in mind. Obviously, life usually doesn't go the way that we've planned, but it's nice to see that things that interest you now can still be a part of your career later on.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I think you just keep trying to figure out how to fit your interests into whatever you're doing, to make sure that you feel good and that you're doing the work that brings something to the world that you can be proud of.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we all want. So our next question is about you being a woman in law enforcement. What are some of the obstacles you have encountered, especially in terms of sexism? And what, in your opinion, is the most important thing for any young woman to know when pursuing a career like yours today?
You know, I have seen such changes just during my 30 years of practice. I'm just a year away from 30 years of practice. And when I was a very young lawyer, I wasn't even allowed to wear pants to court. And some of the stories that I love to tell are just kind of outdated notions of how women lawyers are supposed to look and act. From my first job at the Attorney General's office, one day I wore an all just one color suit, a nice suit from Talbot's, and they asked me to go home on lunch and change because I was wearing pants to work, which is pretty amazing. I bet you guys can't believe that now. But they asked me to go home and put on a skirt, which is pretty crazy. I would routinely go into court because I traveled the state for court for that job. And in South Georgia, Southwest Georgia, like Albany, I would routinely be the only woman in court. It would be a courthouse full of older men, so I'd be the only female. And of course, back then, it was fine to call me honey 37 times, during court. To be honest, I was young, so it didn't offend me as much as it should have. But it was just routine to treat me like I was an anomaly and, a young, cute thing that everybody was rooting for. But it was a very different approach than how it is now. Now, there are as many women as men working in the criminal justice system. Not only can female lawyers wear pants, they can wear anything they want. But times just have really changed over the years. I remember a young prosecutor going to my first crime scene, so the first murder scene that I ever attended. And I was definitely in my 20s. I'm not sure how old I was, but when I got there, the law enforcement said, "Oh, you don't want to see this. This is not for you to see." Like they were protecting me again because I was a female. And of course, over time, I just had to show them that not only could I go into a crime scene, but that I would have good ideas there, and then I could prosecute the case without getting upset or being afraid. So things have really changed over time. Things are much better. We still deal with issues in the workplace. I think that most of the men in the criminal justice system that I work with are trying to get it right. But there's still some times that we've got to maybe give them an update on how you talk to a younger female. But things are certainly getting much better, especially in terms of just our numbers. And honestly, that's how you change things. When you're the majority, you can change it.
Absolutely. It's crazy to think like how much things have changed in just 30 years, from not being able to wear a pantsuit to having like the same amount of women in the criminal justice. Like that's really amazing.
And in most law schools are 50-50 now.
Yeah.
And our bench in Fulton County is more female than male. So we have 12, and I think we now have 12 females and 8 males.
That's a majority.
Yep.
Yes.
So that's great.
Yes. I know that in our Women's in Government Day panel a couple months ago, you mentioned that finding a mentor was so important to your career. And I was wondering if you had any more advice on how to cultivate a good relationship with a mentor and on finding a mentor in general.
Well, you know what, you guys are perfect examples. So a lot of people from your groups have reached out to me. Mahar is a perfect example. So she's regularly attending court virtually for me, and she gets notices of when we're having court. She is serving on a board of a teen court for me that's really fledgling. It's not up and running yet, but she's going to be the student representative for that. And she's helping reestablish My Journey Matters. So she's participating in things that a student would never have access to just because she was brave enough to ask and to show that she's smart and she has good ideas. So she was included in a meeting in the last week that was really important for how we're going to handle My Journey Matters moving forward. And she was brave enough to speak up. So it's she's a great example of what you need to do. So find someone that you'd like to emulate, and then I'm not saying be crazy pushy about it, but be brave enough to reach out and ask to shadow that person. And then if that goes well, ask what else you could do moving forward, if they have other suggestions of other people who could really help you. So I really can't emphasize it enough. I can't say how often I have moved to the next job because a mentor thought of me for another position, or how many times I have recommended someone for a job or just hired them myself. myself. So it's critically important to find that mentor. And you can find a male mentor. That's a good thing too, but it's always so nice for a young female to have a female mentor who can talk to you about how as life evolves, you evolve in your work. So in the beginning of my career, I thought I might not even have children. Now I have two kids, one of whom is very high needs. And, I had to figure that out along the way of how do you make that work with a trial schedule? So anyway, look for a great mentor.
Definitely. So our next question, we've talked about it a little bit. In terms of gender equality, what progress has been made and what still needs to be done to ensure that an equal society is created? And how does the pandemic alter the status of achieving this dream?
You guys know what I noticed recently? We have a female vice president.
Yeah.
So whatever your politics are, however you feel about the election, that's something to be amazed by. So the first election where I ever voted, Walter Mondale, who was not a good candidate, had a female running mate. And so that was my first election as I voted for a female for vice president. And of course they lost because, again, he was not a great candidate. But moving forward, I wondered when I would finally see a female vice president or president, right? And it's realistic that you would expect we'd have a vice president before we have a president. We move slowly in this country on gender issues, very, very slowly. So in college, I had a class where our entire project for the year was to run a candidate for president, a female candidate for president. And amazingly, I had classmates at the time whose conclusion was a female will never be president. So it's an impossible project, which is so dumb. So I'm so excited that while I'm still relatively young, we finally have that. We finally have a female vice president. Next step is president. So we're making progress. There's no denying that there's a glass ceiling in many areas, but we're working on it. We're climbing the mountain.
Absolutely. And I think it's so great to think that little girls today, no matter what their politics end up being, they'll be able to know that there was a female vice president. And it kind of, I think, opens up a new door for them because so far it's all been just men, for vice president as well. But they know that if Kamala Harris is a vice president and she's a woman, then they have a chance as well. And that even opens up the door to dreaming about being president. And I think that's just wonderful. Maybe one day we'll see a woman in, in office, and hopefully it'll be soon.
I hope so. You all will definitely see it, knock on wood. I hope I see it too.
Yes.
But, just during my lifetime, there have been people who said that women could never be president because we're too emotional, we're too, even just, believe it or not, menstrual cycles were argued as a reason women couldn't be president, which is literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But, attitudes change, people change, and the more people feel that it's appropriate, the more likely it is to happen.
I've heard the argument that women are unreliable just because they can get pregnant and then have to have
Awesome. That's so silly. As long as it's okay to throw up when you're president, I would have been fine. Oh gosh. Yeah, it's so interesting to watch over time just how attitudes change. My generation was little. I was in elementary school when the Equal Rights Amendment didn't pass. And so that was the big story in the 70s was ERA and passed an equal rights amendment for women, and it didn't pass. So as a young girl, that's what I knew, is that we couldn't even get a law passed that would say that we had equal rights. So I've really watched an evolution over time, and it's been incredible.
So also in the Women in Government Day panel, you mentioned that you had a very positive experience working in the district attorney's office in the criminal division. So how can we encourage the development of a work environment like that one, which is conducive, but also a place where women are given the opportunity to become leaders in their communities?
You know what? It's interesting because it is very stereotypic, but government is beginning to be more and more female heavy. There is definitely a salary ceiling in government. And I think that maybe young males feel the pressure more to make more money. So more and more government is evolving into more female than male. And again, it's super, super sexist, but that's what's happening over time. The DA's office where I worked, oh no, here's a loud noise. I'm sorry, you guys. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The DA's office where I worked, the top 4 people were female. And again, we were majority female in the office. So it was a very female friendly office. It was a male friendly office too. It was just a friendly office, but it was a different environment because not all women, but lots of women have certain characteristics that can make a workplace very pleasant in terms of maybe being more forgiving of family issues. I think when there's women in leadership, all of a sudden it's okay to say you want to go to your child's game. It's okay to have a family crisis. And I think in traditional old offices that were entirely run by men who had wives at home to deal with family emergencies, there wasn't a lot of tolerance for that. But in a very female dominated office, we encouraged that. We wanted people to love their job, love their life, and be willing to take a lower salary because they get to spend time with their families. So we encouraged, hey, go to kindergarten graduation and go to soccer games. And if you need to leave half an hour early, come half an hour earlier. So it was a very family friendly office. And I think the more women are involved in leadership roles, the more that's true. At least I hope so.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's so great to see more mothers working as well, which is a little bit about what our next question is about. But in my own case, my mom started working, like she was in college, and then she started working when I was around 6 or 7. And it was so nice to see her get out there and just like start going to work, and she would come home and she would just feel so much more energized, because definitely being a stay-at-home mom is no easy job. I feel like it just is so difficult to stay at home all day, and whoever does that, like, they have my respect, because
Hey.
it's not easy to manage the household all day and then wait for people to come home. Yeah.
I know. I've always said work is my respite. Kudos to anybody of either gender who stays home with children, because it's very, very hard.
Absolutely.
And I do think it just broadens your world. You have more people in your world if you work. So it is also a very, very respectable thing to stay home with children. It is too hard for most people to do well. So it's great when people are able to do that. It's great when they're able to do both. A lot of people take time off, spend a few years with their kids, and then really get back to the work environment. But ideally, you can do both. You just have to have either a great partner or good childcare or an excellent boss.
Yes.
I definitely agree. And just to add one thing to that, I think it's so amazing to see more women getting involved in the workforce, just because many times women are almost disproportionately subject to domestic chores and taking care of the children in the house. So it's just nice to see women empowered and working in the world.
Yeah, it is. My mom was the same as yours. She went back to college when she'd done one career path and had dropped out of nursing school before she had kids, got married really young, like 19. And then she went back to college to be a teacher when I was in maybe elementary school, and started working full time as a teacher, maybe when I was in 8th or 9th grade. And so that was really good for me to watch, because that was so hard to have a family and go to college and then find a job. It was really tough. So again, told me, keep going, finish it while you're on track.
Yes. Okay, so before your time as a judge, you worked a lot with child welfare and child safety, and you also founded the Child Death Investigation Program and the Infant Safe Sleep Coalition. As a mother of 2 boys, how does this strengthen your passion in this field? And also, what is it like being a working mother today?
Well, today it's great because I have flexibility in my job. There have been times when it was so hard. I had some jobs where when I was a young assistant district attorney, I'd wear a bracelet with my son's name on it because I'd get so busy during the day. And I'd wear that bracelet on days when I knew there was some like event at the daycare that I couldn't forget, because I always wanted to be there. So I struggled with feeling guilty about not being there more for him, or long hours. So it was very tough. But as I've continued to get progressively more autonomy, it's gotten easier and easier. As I mentioned, I've got a very high needs child. He's got health problems too. That's the silver lining of COVID for me. So he's had hospital stays and a lot of doctor visits. I can Zoom court and be back immediately if I need to do something with him. And I think one thing about COVID is it's going to change forever how everyone works. Nothing will go exactly back the same as it was before COVID, in my estimation, after this. And being able to do some things virtually or work from home more in jobs that we never thought you could work from home. We never thought we could trust people to actually get their jobs done. Guess what? They got their jobs done. So I think it's going to make it easier and easier for people to spend the time they need with their kids. I mentioned the phrase, my lens, earlier, and kids really are my biggest lens on the world and on cases. we can't really control whether someone's going to go out and commit crimes again, but we can take steps in criminal cases to try to make sure their kids are a little safer, even if their kids weren't the subject of the crime. So I think that, one of the things I emphasize when I'm taking a guilty plea to a criminal defendant is whether their kids need them home. I usually ask them about their kids and ask them their kids' names and ask them if their kids need them home or if they need them in prison, and if their kids know where they are that day, and if they know what they did. And it's interesting how many grown men just begin to sob. And it seems like what I have learned as an adult is pretty much everyone has some lever that will make them act. And if you want someone to do something, you need to find out what their lever is. And for most people, that's their kids. That's who they love unconditionally. That's who they want to do the right thing for. So I think that's true of criminal defendants too. If there's any chance for them to do better, it's usually because they love their kids and they want to be around their kids, or they feel horrible about what happened with their kids. So that's a really important lens for me. And like I said, I wasn't even sure I would have kids. So it's interesting. It's interesting that that's become the real story of my career and my life. But that's the story.
That is so great to hear. I think it's really important, like you said, just to take people's kids into consideration, especially when they're going to prison, because I think it's just like, I can't imagine how it must be like for the kids in those situations to have a parent being prosecuted or going to jail. I think it's really nice that you show them some compassion and think about them. I'm sure it means a lot to their families.
Well, I hope so. And just, understanding the cycle of what happens when you have parents in prison. The officers involved with the My Journey Matters program with the young offenders that I've got told me recently that they think, when I asked them to estimate, so it's not a provable number right now, they're working on the data, but I asked them to estimate just anecdotally how many of the people we're dealing with have been in care, meaning in foster care or in formal care with a relative instead of their parents. They said 95%. So that's really upsetting. And it's important to take into account. People need adults in their lives, and to be resilient, you need someone who you want to do the right thing for.
Definitely. And then our last question is just about us as a community. What can we as young leaders do to work towards equality in our communities and just within our schools?
Well, don't be afraid to go for the leadership roles. I think when I was in school, it was kind of unheard of for a girl to run for student body president. Like, we would run for treasurer, or we would run for secretary, or even vice president, but never president. So I think it's important that you guys are comfortable stepping out as leaders, making decisions, heading up committees, having a voice, being the editor of the newspaper. Don't be scared to have a voice. You're just as smart as the guys, and you have different perspectives. So you just have to take that step and have confidence about it.
Absolutely. And I think that now things are actually changing, because I feel like for the last couple of years, our student body president has been primarily girls. So that's really good to hear that things are changing in that direction.
That's great.
Yeah. And I think
so that the statement that representation matters at every level. So
absolutely.
When the student body president can be a girl, then the president of the board can be a girl, and eventually the president of the United States can be a girl.
Yes. Okay, so that's all we have for questions, but I would love to open up the floor to any questions from the audience. You guys can put it in the chat box or just open your mics and ask.
I think this question we have asked all of our panelists today. I just want to mention it once more with Judge Carnesale. What power do you think the youth hold, you've worked so much with children and protecting them, and you're also a huge supporter of student leadership Johns Creek. So what power do you think the youth hold?
First of all, you're a giant voting bloc, so you hold power that way. You also make decisions with the money that you spend, and you have different ideas than the generation above you about what the right way is to live your life and spend your money. So you're a big block, and you need to remember the power that comes with that. And then secondly, you have the time and energy and ability to make big changes in how things are done. You can decide what you will and will not accept. And that's a really special opportunity. So you guys are perfect examples with Student Leadership Johns Creek of deciding how you think things should be and making them be that way. And that really is all it takes, is making the decision that you will or will not tolerate something and then making it the way it should be. So I want to see you guys keep doing that. I'm so proud of all of you.
Absolutely. We're so, so thankful to have great mentors like you and support of our program and all of our students overall. With that, if I don't see any other questions from the audience, just give it a second.
That's okay. Again, I'm so proud of your gold star, Aditi. And with any luck, when I get back to the game, we'll get in the game. So
there is a question in
okay.
our from our audience. It says, do you have any specific advice for women going into law or politics?
Well, surround yourself with people you can trust. Don't get involved with people who you don't trust, because their failures will become your failures if you go into politics. Just be careful who you surround yourself with. Make sure that they're people that you trust and who are smart and want to do the right thing. It's very easy to allow people into your circle and trust them if they're just willing to work, but you've got to vet those people and make sure that they're good representation for you, because if you don't take yourself down, people around you can too.
Absolutely.
I wanted to just really quick thank you for coming. I'm always the background behind these kids, but I just wanted to make sure you know that I was here and I was paying attention. I can take the test.
Well, thank you for having me, guys. I'm starting to shiver a little. Sorry, the thing is moving. It's so cold outside.
Yeah, well,
high school is lovely.
It is. It's nice. All the high schools in Johns Creek are. Well, thanks again, Rachelle.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm